My name is Jocelyn Williamson, and I'm one of the directors of the Central Florida Free Thought Community. Thank you for joining us today. As you probably know by now, our monthly events have become bi-weekly online talks with some of the most amazing people that we know who can visit with us from anywhere in the world to share what's going on in their world right now. So today we're joined by Dave Warnock, who was supposed to join us live in March in person, but that of course has changed, but he's here with us now, and we are going to be live on Zoom right now, but are also live streaming on YouTube. In a minute I'll introduce Dave, but I want to be sure that you know a couple things before we get started. Until we can meet in person, we're going to be continuing these online events just like this one, as well as our regular meetups where everyone can spend time together and commiserate, and you can all join in the conversation. And to find out about those in advance and to get the login information for those webinars, go to our meetup page at meetup.com/CFL Freethought. Those of you in the Zoom webinar right now, you can see the chat option available at the bottom of your screen. If you're on a computer, you may move your mouse, to have that actually pop up. If you're on a mobile device, just tap the screen and it should appear as an option. But the chat is not where you want to ask questions. If you want to submit a question, which we hope lots of questions are going to be coming, then type that into the Q&A feature, which is also at the bottom of your screen. And we'll take those questions as we are able. Apologies in advance, though, if we don't get to every single question. Sometimes we get so many we can't get to them all. So with that, I will introduce our special guest for today's event. Dave Warnock is a former evangelical pastor who was a church leader for nearly 40 years of his life. Just over 10 years ago, he started looking into the beliefs of his religion and concluded that his faith was something he could no longer embrace. As many of us have learned, this often comes with a huge cost. Nearly all of his friends, his 37-year marriage, a relationship with two of his 3 children, as well as his 6 grandchildren. These were all sacrificed because he simply changed his mind and had the courage to say it out loud. He started calling himself an agnostic, but in the last few years has begun to use the word atheist to describe himself more accurately. Since that realization, he is working to destigmatize the word atheist and attempting to demonstrate that atheists are good people who have the same morals and values as those who follow religion. Dave has come to believe that this life, the only one we know we have, is to be lived for the moments that are contained within it, rather than viewing it as temporary. And I can speak from my own experience about people I know in our local community who have left their lives in religious leadership to become allies and advocates for secularism and humanism. It's a challenge. These people can bring a great deal of knowledge and experience to our groups as they tell their stories and describe their life experiences, shedding light on concepts most of us won't have the privilege of experiencing in a way that is fascinating as well to hear. Today should be no different. He's had his friends and followers in the church, but now he has even more friends and followers in the free thought movement. Dave, thanks for joining us and welcome to the CFFC.
Hello everyone. Well, I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina at my girlfriend's house, and from Nashville, Tennessee. And like Jocelyn said, I was supposed to be there with you in person in March. And we talked earlier and hopeful that we can reschedule things next year. I don't anticipate any meetings happening the rest of this year. So everything that we had scheduled through this year, we were actually supposed to be in England and Germany and Amsterdam and much of Europe in May and June, and that all got scrapped. So like everyone else, we are adjusting to the new reality of what life with COVID is like. I hope you guys are all staying safe and staying sane, because sometimes that's the challenge. As Jocelyn indicated, she gave a little bit of an overview of my story, and that's kind of what my talk is about, really, is my journey from evangelical fundamentalist Christianity and ministry in that branch into what journey through agnosticism into atheism. And oftentimes those are the same thing. Agnostic atheist is I guess the term that would best describe me, because agnostic simply means we don't know. I don't know. And when somebody asks me about a belief in a deity, my simple answer is I don't know, and neither do you. Atheism is a term that, just as you know, it simply means I don't believe in a God of any kind. I don't see enough evidence to believe in a God. And having said that, I want to say that atheism does not mean I believe there's no God. A difference. It's a huge difference, but it's just two short words, two small words that make the difference. I'm not saying I believe there's no God. I'm saying I don't believe there's a God. And so when people say things to me that sound like idiotic statements, like I don't have enough faith to be an atheist, that simply means they don't understand what the word means. But that being said, about 10 years ago, as Jocelyn said, I came to the end of my faith. And I used to say I lost my faith, but a more accurate description of those events would be that I discarded my faith because it no longer fit me. It no longer, I at one point I wrote that it was like I've been trying to wear a jacket that just didn't fit. And I tried for 37, 38 years to wear a jacket or to wear a suit that never did fit me. And finally, I just took it off and shed it and began to live life as a free thinker, as a humanist, as an atheist, because that to me became the only thing that made sense. Christianity no longer made sense to me. It was continuing to be at odds with who I believed I was as a person, my morality, my humanity. And that was long before the evangelical world that we're living in now, wherein 81% of them support Donald Trump as president. I shudder to think what it would be like for me now, trying to maintain my evangelical identity in this current climate. I can't imagine how I would make peace with that. So I'm glad I got out when I did. As Jocelyn said, it cost me a great deal, to be honest with myself and with others. I was very active, involved. I was in ministry. Had a huge community of people who believed like I did and thought like I did. And when I began to think and believe differently, many of them discarded me, much like I discarded my faith. I've never discarded any people. I've never said to anyone, I no longer want you in my life. I simply changed the way that I viewed life and changed my worldview and admitted that I'd been wrong for most of my adult life about how I thought the world worked. And because of that, many of my friends and family members decided they could no longer do life with me. My two older daughters, I've got 3 kids. They're all married and raising their own families. I've got 6 grandchildren. Between my 2 daughters, my son is younger and he and his wife live in Manhattan, New York City, and they don't have any kids. But my grandkids I don't see, my daughters I don't see, and they just simply have told me that until I return to God and repent of my sin, that they can't embrace relationship with me. That's pretty much the position that they've taken. And I understand what their position is. I understand why they have to come to that place. I don't agree with it. I don't think it's the right way to treat people. I've told them that, but there's nothing I can do about it. And so a few years ago, I made peace with that element of my life. I left the marriage I've been in for a long time because my ex-wife, she remained a believer, and the ideology that she embraced as an evangelical fundamentalist Christian no longer, I could no longer make peace with being joined with someone who held to ideas that I found to be dangerous and harmful to people. The idea that a certain percentage of the population is going to go to hell, that people are born broken and lost and need a savior. Those ideas are repugnant to me. They are ideas I used to embrace, but to me, they do harm to people. They do great harm to people. Concepts of hell, of judgment, those kind of things. So that led me out of that, and I began to live my life as a free thinking atheist. I have a lot of good friends that I've met since I left faith. A lot of them I met through other online venues like the Clergy Project. Many of you may have heard of that. It's an organization that is it's an online forum for clergy who no longer believe in a deity. And I got connected. I did a search online and found that group and got connected with them. And through them, I began to meet other like-minded people who'd been in Christianity and had left. Ex-pastors. Some of my best friends now are ex-pastors and ex-Christians. And we just, once you go through something like that, you identify with people who've been through something similar. And so that became my community. It was in Nashville at the time. That's where I've been living up until this past year, where I've moved to Charlotte to be with my girlfriend. And we live here in Charlotte, North Carolina. And we've got a vibrant community of ex-Christian atheists in Nashville I still connect with. We did a Zoom meeting yesterday with a bunch of them. I hope to be going over there in the next week or two to see some of them. Social distancing, 6 feet apart with masks on, but we can still wave across the 6 feet division. But I find incredible value in that. Just a personal note, the lockdown, the shutdown of all my schedules of the travel that we were doing, the in-person meetings, those were very important to me. And shutting that down and having to stop that was a very difficult thing for me to embrace. I had because it's just, not only are we all living on borrowed time and living a life that's brief and precious. I because of my diagnosis of ALS, I feel like mine is a bit more brief and maybe a little more precious, but in the sense that I have at least a little bit of a glimpse into what my ending is going to look like or when it may be coming than most people do. That's a blessing and a curse. As I mentioned, and I think Jocelyn mentioned in the intro, a little over a year ago, I was diagnosed with ALS, which is Lou Gehrig's disease, which, as you know, if you know anything about that, it's a terminal disease that the general prognosis is 3 to 5 years to live upon diagnosis. I've had the disease a couple of years now, and I know that by looking back at symptoms that I started having as long as 2 years ago. The formal diagnosis didn't come until February of 2019. And so that kind of changed everything I'd been doing. I was living a life in Nashville, like I said, selling insurance. I'd gotten into the insurance business after I left pastoring and was doing quite well with that and was quite happy. And what I considered living my best life. And then I got this diagnosis a little over a year ago, like I said. And so that kind of changed my perspective on life and what I wanted the rest of my life to look like. And if you've seen any of the stuff that I've been doing, you've heard the phrase "carpe the fucking diem." That is a phrase that began to exemplify my life even before I got ALS. A friend of mine had given me a throw pillow with that embroidery on it, "Carpe the fucking diem." And just to translate that from the Latin, it means "seize the fucking day." I think I'm not a linguist, but I think that's what that means. And that was kind of what my life was like pre-ALS days, because I felt like I'd rebooted my life after leaving Christianity and leaving my marriage and rebooting and starting over in my mid 60s. I'm 64 now, but that was about, well, my early 60s is when I essentially started my life over. And that was an attitude that I adopted because I really began to see life as much more precious than I had viewed it before. And what that means is, and this is, I'm going to quote a line from a poem that was given to me a year ago, right after I got the ALS diagnosis. And the poem is called "My Soul Has a Hat, and it's from a Brazilian poet named Mario de Andrade. And the last line says this: "We have two lives, and the second one begins when you realize you only have one." Now, my realization that I only had one life did not happen upon my ALS diagnosis. It happened when I left Christianity. As an evangelical Christian, by definition, the theology says that we believe that Jesus was born of a virgin, died for our sins, rose from the dead, and those who place their faith in him are saved. You're born again, you're saved, you're on the right side of the question about God, and you're destined for the right eternity. And so that view simply says that this life is a preview or a temporal life. And the real life is eternal life. And the life that we live after we die, whether that's eternal damnation in hell or eternal glory in heaven. Of course, we believe that we were destined for eternal glory in heaven because we had prayed the right prayer to the right deity. Just lucky that I was born in a country that steered me in that direction, right? And so, as a Christian, as the kind of Christian I was, like I said, evangelical, that was the big issue: where you're going to spend eternity. The things of this life were temporal. All the things you can see are temporal. The things you can't see are eternal. That's what the scripture taught us. That's what I taught from the pulpit. That's what I believed. Well, upon exiting that mindset, I realized, no, this life is it. This is the life we have. There's no afterlife. This is the only life we get. And it's brief, it's precious. It's also chaotic and unpredictable. And I'm living proof of that because a few years into that new mindset, I got slapped with a terminal disease. If you don't know anything about ALS, it's a motor neuron disease. It affects the muscles. Essentially, my nerves quit telling my muscles what to do, and so the muscles quit doing things. It's like us. If nobody tells us what to do, we don't do anything. So my muscles are gradually going to stop working. My symptoms began in my fingers, in my hands, and my arms, and it's moving kind of up my body that way. I began to have trouble writing certain numbers and letters in my insurance business. I began to have trouble opening packages and buttoning buttons and little daily tasks that you don't think of until you realize you can't do them or you're having trouble doing them. And that began to be the symptoms that I saw, whereas I realized something's wrong. And then I started going to doctors at the beginning of 2019. And I got the diagnosis, as I said, at the end of February. Now, eventually the disease will transfer through my body. Either it'll attack my legs and I'll need a wheelchair, or it'll move up into my mouth area, my throat. I'll have trouble eating and breathing. And eventually that's where, when it gets to that place, you lose the ability to breathe. And that's why you die. There is no treatment at this point. There are some promising things on the horizon, some stem cell treatments that many of us in the ALS community have hope for. They've shown good results in some clinical trials and so on. But right now, there's nothing that I have access to that can help me. So that said, when I got that diagnosis and I was given 3 to 5 years to live, that's when I took stock again of my life and what I wanted to do with it, with the increasingly brief time that I had left. And so that's how the dying out loud thing got birthed. I was working, and a week or two after the diagnosis, I decided to retire early. I decided that I wanted to travel as much as I could. I wanted to spend time with people that I cared about. And that began to be my focus. Not things, not working, not making money. I just didn't care about that stuff anymore. I started giving stuff away. I moved out of my apartment in with friends so that I would have help as I would increasingly need it. Um, and then some friends of mine were over in March of last year, and one of my friends, Marie, who's become my manager and assistant, she lives in Minneapolis of all places. So she's not able to be with us today because she's at a protest. I just got word from her, which I would rather her be at that than listening to me yet again. She started asking me what I want to do with my time, and she does a lot of virtual assistant stuff. And so she started reaching out to the secular community and booking me on podcasts and shows and in formats like your group there in Florida and other places around the country and around the world. And so we adopted this phrase, this term, dying out loud, to kind of encapsulate what it was I wanted to talk about, because ALS is a terminal disease, and I was in essence dying. Although the thing I talk about when I do talk at times like this, or in person, or on podcasts, it really could be more aptly titled "Living Out Loud," because the thing I do talk about and the message that I carry, my message to you, to anyone that's listening, is yes, we're all dying, but the big question is, how are you living? How is your story being written? Are you writing the story, or is someone else? That's one thing I realized when I was rebooting my life. I realized that the loss of my relationship with my daughters and grandchildren was causing me a great deal of sadness and depression. And in essence, that loss was writing my story. I was not living the life I wanted to live. And so I decided then, even before ALS, to take back the pen and write my own story. And so my question to you, or to anyone, is, are you writing the story you want to write? Are you living the story you want to live? If you're not, whose fault is that? And who's going to change that? We don't have a deity that's looking out for us. We don't have anyone that's responsible for us. We're responsible for ourselves. And we make choices, we make decisions, and we bear the consequences, good or bad. And so those of us who are able to look at life and make it be what we want it to be, we are the ones that choose what those days and moments are going to look like. Another phrase I began to live by in those years after my deconversion, after my divorce, was a phrase that I saw on a plaque that I have still. And it says, "We do not remember days, we remember moments." And I found that to be true as I look back on my life. And what that means to me is life is nothing more than a collection of moments. It's not a big plan. It's not a big thing that the pieces all fit together. Used to, we would think that God has a wonderful plan for your life. You ever hear that one? It's not true. It's a lie. There is no big plan. There is no puzzle pieces fitting together. It's just life. It's what you make it. You make the moments. The moments can be big and grand. Like I had some big moments in Amalfi, on the Amalfi Coast in Italy, a few months after my diagnosis. I had a trip planned. I went with some friends, and it was an amazing trip, and I had some amazing moments. But other moments can be simple and can be just as profound, but just simple. Like my girlfriend Bevan and I will be sitting on a couch and Netflixing, having a drink and Netflix with her dog stretched out beside us, laughing at some show we're watching and cuddling, and just that is a moment. That is precious. But if we're not careful and we're not aware, we'll miss it. And we'll let stuff happen to us that we're not in control of, and we'll let stuff derail us. Especially, I see it especially prevalent or possible in times like this, when we're shut up, when life has pretty much come to a grinding halt, and now we've got the undercurrent of racism exploding all around us again, long past when it should have been dealt with. And those kind of things can steal our moments. They can become the things that cause us anxiety and depression and stress. And I'm not going to lie, those things cause me anxiety and depression and stress. I'm very sad and disappointed with where we are as a people, as a country, and asking myself and other people, what can we do? What can we do about this? And so we all have to decide what we want our days and moments to look like. And so I started talking about things like that in podcasts and on YouTube shows. And I started hearing from people around the country and around the world who were being inspired by me talking about this. And some people who are dealing with serious issues like cancer and clinical depression and PTSD and family issues and divorce, and just finding some inspiration and some support from the things I was saying about what life is and what it isn't and what we can make it. And so that's why I'm doing this. That's why I'm talking about living out loud, and I'm talking about dying out loud, and I'm talking about making the most of the moments we have and not letting things pass us by. And I'm going to keep talking about these things as long as I'm able to talk. Once we're able to travel again, I'll be traveling hopefully back to Florida or down to Florida to see you guys. Anywhere that people want us to come talk, we want to come talk. I meet a lot of people when I'm talking. I hear from a lot of people who deal with trauma associated with evangelicalism. I met a guy in Cincinnati who told me he and his wife drove 4 hours to come see me talk. And it was just before things shut down, early March, I believe. And he said he'd been dealing with fear of hell and death, fear of death for most of his life. And my talking about death and talking about dying had helped him come to terms with it. And he had said that it had paralyzed him. His fear of death had paralyzed him so much so that he felt like he was never able to enjoy life, never able to focus on living because he was afraid of dying. And I've talked to a lot of people that deal with that. It's become a common theme in questions and emails and things that I get. People who just don't know what to do with the idea of death. I get asked all the time, and some of you may even have had this question queued up. Am I afraid of dying? I'm not. That's the simple answer. I don't like to talk about death. My girlfriend especially doesn't like me to talk about it. But it's the reality of where I'm at. And death is nothing to fear. I'll just say that. Death is the natural result of living. How we die is oftentimes I come to see a thing that people fear maybe more than death itself. The actual death moment when I go to sleep or lose consciousness in some way for some reason, and I don't ever regain consciousness, I'm done. That is nothing in and of itself to be afraid of, in my opinion, because the reality of that is that we won't be aware of it. I won't wake up after that and go, oh my God, I'm dead. What am I going to do now? That's not a thing. I'm not going to be aware of anything. And so when you look at it that way, that's not a fearful thing. That's just the next step. The method or the way, now ALS is a very ugly disease. It gets very ugly at the end. If I let it go to that natural end, then I will become a vegetable, basically, unable to feed or clothe myself or dress and clothe is the same thing. Bathe myself. I'll need help doing everything. And at that point, or somewhere before that point, I'm going to say, no, I'm done. I'm not gonna let it get to that. And so one of the things I wanted to make sure I bring up is a group called the Final Exit Network. I'm trying to show it, but I'm sure you can't see it. FinalExitNetwork.org. I came in contact with them about a year ago. A friend of mine found them and he turned me on to them, and I reached out to them to talk to them about what they do and how they do it. It's a nonprofit that I've now become formally connected with. because I was talking about them everywhere, and one of their people heard me and got me in touch with the leadership there, and so we have developed a good relationship. But they're an organization, nonprofit, full of volunteers that helps people like me who have terminal diseases that have no hope of getting better at this point, and that want to take control of the end of my life. And I want to stress that's the key word, is control, is me having choices as to what that's going to look like and when that's going to happen. It's legal in every state. They help you with legal issues. They help you get your legal ducks in a row, your financial ducks in a row. They help you with the equipment you're going to need, with how to walk through it, how to plan for it. And that's what I intend to do when that time comes. Now, when that time is, I don't know yet. And I may draw a line in the sand and say, this is when I'm going to do that. And then I may at some point decide, no, I want to go a little further. And the point is, though, I believe I should have that choice. I believe I should be the one to make that decision. And for those religious folks or otherwise who say you shouldn't be able to do that, I say, why not? And if they say, well, that's just playing God, I'll say, well, then don't ever go to the doctor. Don't ever have the surgery. Don't ever take the medicine. If you're just going to let nature take its course, then you won't do anything to keep yourself alive or to end your life when it becomes unbearable. And that's the key. When it becomes a quality of life that I'm no longer satisfied with, I want to have the options and the choices to say yes or no to that. So that's the thing I talk about, because I feel I've found, as I've talked about the dying out loud message, the subject is that when people talk about having a fear of death, a lot of times it's more along the lines of being afraid of what the end of their life may look like. And I can identify with that, because who wants to, none of us want to be kept alive in a state that we're not happy with. That's just not something that I've found very few people that are looking forward to that. In fact, I don't know of anyone. The other fear of death has to do with hell, the idea of an eternal hell. That notion, I speak very strongly against evangelical Christianity, and I make a distinction between evangelicalism and the other strains of Christianity, which are more progressive. The idea of an eternal hell, that there's a God somewhere that designed that and created that for a vast majority of created humanity to end up there, is a repugnant idea to begin with. So I'm very, excuse me, I have to drink water constantly or my voice. I'm going to wrap up in a minute and take Q&A, because I'm looking at the clock there and I'm realizing I'm droning on. But I've met a lot of people, grown adults, who still have a subliminal fear of hell that is in them, where they'll know in their minds it's not real, but it was ingrained in them so much as an impressionable young person, a child, that it has become lodged in their subconscious, and they still will wake up in the middle of the night with sweats from feeling like they're burning in some kind of eternal flames. If I've said this before in meetings and in public and whatever, that if there was a God, if you could prove to me today that the God of the Bible is indeed real, I still wouldn't worship him, her. Because the God of the Bible, according to Scripture, created this idea of hell, this place for eternal punishment. That's the Christian doctrine. And there are those who would argue that it's not really in the Bible, that Christian theologians created that afterwards in order to control people, which I believe is probably true. But Jesus did talk about things like that. He talked about hell. He talked about weeping and gnashing of teeth, and the separation of the sheep and the goats. So nice, gentle Jesus talked a lot about hell. And I'll end with this in regard to hell. Christian theology in its purest form says this scenario is is consistent with evangelical Christian theology, that Anne Frank, as a Jewish teenager, is now in hell because she never confessed Jesus as her Lord. And Ted Bundy, an infamous serial killer, is in heaven because he did confess Jesus as Lord while he was in prison. Now you can argue all day long about, well, God knows what he's doing, and who knows if Anne didn't pray the prayer, and God's got all this under control, and he chooses who goes. But I'm talking about Christian theology. The evangelical mindset that I discarded 10 years ago creates that scenario, and that is a scenario from hell itself, that Anne Frank, an innocent teenage girl, could end up in hell because she didn't pray the sinner's prayer, and Ted Bundy, who did horrific things, obviously mentally ill, would end up in heaven, and because he prayed to Jesus at the end. That's horrific. That idea is horrific. And I would never worship a God who made that scenario possible. So I do speak very strongly out against evangelicalism, and I make no apologies for it because I think it's a hideous ideology, and I think it does great damage to people. And there are people living with a great deal of religious trauma still today because of that. And I could talk more. Maybe I'll get into some more details of my story and the details of it through the Q&A part, which we will now. Yes, there's Jocelyn, and she's going to modify the Q&A for me, and we can go from there.
Thank you so much, Dave. I'm so happy that you've been able to come in and join us today, and I am very optimistic that next year, when we get that all clear, we'll be able to start having meetings with you in person. Actually, I wanted to ask, thinking about ALS and the coronavirus, do you have an increased risk factor as a result of ALS?
I don't. In fact, I thought I had a mild case of it a month or so ago. I had some symptoms, but they wouldn't let me get a test because I didn't have the cough. So I may never know. In fact, I've gotten the other test that's supposed to show if you had it or not, antibody test, and it was negative as well. So I probably didn't have it. But no, I'm not at risk classically. The only thing about me getting a case of COVID is if it did damage to my lungs, which it has done, I've heard in many cases, then it would make me that much weaker when the time came when ALS started affecting my lungs. They would start affecting damaged lungs. So that would be a negative for me.
Huh. I'm actually hearing that studies have come out that they're now saying that possibly it's related more to our vascular system, cardiovascular system. They're thinking that it may have an impact there. But we don't need to go down that rabbit hole. Actually, you mentioned Final Exit. Final Exit is a group that we have connected with, and they'll be speaking to the CFFC in the upcoming months. So that's something that we also advocate people to be aware of, and we want to support them.
Yeah, their headquarters is in Tallahassee, actually.
Oh wow, I did not know that. I think we had somebody in Miami reach out to us, and we were.
Yeah, they're a great group, and we're trying to get more awareness of them. It's just, some people just don't like talking about death. It's not a fun subject, let's be real, but it's something we're all going to experience. And so knowing that we have choices, knowing that we have control is a big key. It's for peace of mind. That's the thing they offer.
It's interesting because I'm a third generation atheist, so my grandparents identified as non-believers. Wow. Yeah, I'm an anomaly. And I'm 50. But the question I would have is, my father's always been very open talking about, when I die, you need to make sure that I don't suffer. It's been something I've heard since I was knee-high to a grasshopper, as they say in the Midwest. And so I would say, do you think from the time when you were identifying as a Christian to now, are you more comfortable talking about death? I mean, does it change? I mean, like how does that feel different?
Yeah, well, one of the interesting things early on with me in the ALS journey here is that I found pretty quickly that my Christian friends and family did not know what to do with this diagnosis, they pretty much have stayed away from me. Whereas my atheist friends have gotten in the middle of it with me and run toward it instead of away from it. And I was really puzzled about that early on, but then I realized that looking back on my life as a Christian, I realized that Christians deal with death in a really weird way. There's a lot of fear of death there, which seems odd in terms of their theology, because you would think if they believed that at death they now get to be with Jesus, they would be in a hurry to die. You just bring it on, but they're not. And the Bible itself teaches that death is an enemy, and that the fear of death keeps people in bondage, and that the last enemy that shall be destroyed is death. So when you grow up thinking of death in those terms, that it's bad, that it's an enemy, that it's fearful, that it causes bondage and fear, and then on the one hand you talk about it in those terms, on the other hand death is nothing more than a portal to them. So there's a great deal of denial of death in that community, I've found. Whereas an atheist, as a secular person, it doesn't have all of that mystery and that fog around it. It's just, I think we're able as secular people to deal with death in a more clear-headed way. It's just matter of fact, like your dad talks about. Yeah, when it happens, I just don't want to suffer. And that's where I think people are more in line of, I'm not as fearful of death. I'm just fearful of being reduced to a vegetable mentally or physically.
Definitely. Yes. I've always, I grew up around people who were pretty religious, and then I'd go home and I'd hear my father speaking. So it was always kind of this weird, wow, other people don't talk like my dad, but my dad seems right. So anyway, it's just interesting how when we grow up hearing things, we then have to kind of, I don't know, go and investigate it for a while, and then realize that we've come back to where they were in this case. Okay, so we have a few questions.
Okay.
One question we had was regarding your family's refusing to have anything to do with you. Have you ever tried to talk to them about the Christian thing to do? And if so, what did they say?
The Christian thing to do. Oh, you mean in terms of their shunning of me?
Yes.
Yeah, many people early on, and the odd thing is, early on there was a shunning aspect of it where they just wouldn't connect with me at all. And even when I was still married, they wouldn't connect with my wife as well, even though she was a believer. Because she stayed married to me, they pretty much cut her out of their life as well. But yeah, I talked to them about the Christian thing to do. I've got Christian family, and they talk to them about it. My older brother is an evangelical pastor, and he used to advocate for me on my behalf to them, saying, this is not the way to do this. This is not right. And they just wouldn't be reasoned with. They were in a church. They're both out of the church now, but they were in a church that really did teach shunning, and it was an effective way of controlling people and manipulating people. But yeah, I talked to them for the first few years of it. I talked to them a lot about it, and so much so that it was causing me so much anxiety and depression. I finally let it go and not keep it in the forefront of my mind.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you had that. It's to me, it's heartbreaking if family can't sit down and talk about things and love each other for what we do have in common.
Yeah.
And embrace those things.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
It is. Do you ever use the word humanist? I mean, do you think those values that you are considered Christian are actually humanist values and perhaps shared by everyone? Could we say that?
Yeah, I do believe that's what I really am as a humanist. I was always, even as a Christian, as a pastor, I was always very people oriented. I wasn't like I wasn't like a distant theologian. I was very much involved in people's lives and very aware of their humanity and moved by their humanity. And so looking back, I realized that was just me being who I am. I had a Christian label on it, but it was just simply me caring about people, which I still do. That has not changed. I am who I am. I've just taken the Christian label off of it. So I think humanist more aptly describes who I am as a person. Atheist is just the label I use in response to people's assertion that there's a God. We wouldn't need the word atheist if this country weren't trying to be taken over by theocratic, theocratic evangelicals wanting everyone to behave like they do and believe like they do. So I would just as soon not have to use the word atheist, because it only is a word that is used in response to the word theist.
That's true. Very, very true. Yeah, I could go on about politics, but we're a 501c3, so I'll just,
Just
I
get our
think,
blood pressure up.
it does for me. Go vote, everyone, and if you haven't registered to vote, make sure you are registered to vote. Okay, so another question. What would you say to someone who is afraid of death, not of hell or of a painful passing, but of the idea of not existing anymore? The person who wrote this said that this has given them panic attacks since they were 4. And, is it vanity or the ego to not want your existence to burn out? And how can I ever hope to get past it? That's what they wrote.
Yeah, that's the kind of question I've gotten a lot, and it's I feel for people who deal with that, because I don't ever want to come across like I've got some pat answer, or that I've got that I'm not sensitive to that kind of fear, because I am. I don't experience it myself, but I'm aware that it can be very traumatizing. What would my answer to that person would simply be, what is it that you think you're afraid of? If they say, I'm afraid of death, I fear death, what aspect of that do you really think you're afraid of? The idea of not existing anymore, like I said before, and this is what I try to do. I try to break it down, take it apart like you would some clock you were going to work on. You just take it apart. So take the idea of death apart. The idea of not existing anymore, that's nothing really to be afraid of, because once you don't exist anymore, you will not be aware that you're not existing. I mean, that sounds like a philosophical riddle, but it's really not. If you really think about it, it has to be true. There won't be any awareness on the other side that you're no longer alive. You just simply won't be alive. And so there's nothing to fear in that. I would say to that person, try to find ways to carpe the fucking diem, to seize the moments, to grab what there is in this life. Life is absolutely amazing. It's beautiful. There are moments abounding if you're looking for them, and if you're making them happen, if you're giving them a place to happen, if you're giving them a chance to happen. People who are afraid of death oftentimes are missing life, and they're letting the fear of death take away from them the beauty and the wonder of living the days that we do have. And so I know that there's not an easy answer to getting past that, but if you just break down the idea of death itself, it's nothing to be afraid of. It's really not. Just when people say you're afraid of dying, I say, no, I'm afraid of not living. I'm afraid of letting life pass me by.
Do you have any thoughts on how does one focus on the moment? I mean, and this is just kind of an aside. As you're talking, it makes me think about that, which I have a tendency to want to. I'm thinking about what the next moment is. I'm thinking about what do I need to do later. How do I get myself in order for tomorrow? And have you ever been like that, and B, how do you not focus on the other things and be in the moment?
I don't want to get to where it sounds like a cliche on a poster, live in the moment and all that stuff, because everyone says that, and it's true. It's a challenge. It's a challenge. It's about being aware, in my opinion. And I don't do this perfectly. I don't want to sound like I've got this figured out. I still get caught up in, especially when everything shut down and my calendar got erased. I was really depressed and really upset, because I felt like I don't have this time to waste. I don't have years to make this up. I gotta do it now. This is my moment. And that was taken away. And so it pissed me off. But I think it's just trying to be aware and trying to slow down and stop. Like an example, a few months ago, some friends and I, we were just having some drinks, and we were just talking and laughing, and talking about everything and nothing. You know how that is. Just sharing some life together. And I just stopped us for a minute and I said, listen, guys, this is what I'm talking about. Let's don't miss this. This is a moment. And I started crying as I said it. I get emotional thinking about it because it was just a group of guys just talking and laughing and doing nothing but sharing the best part of life together. And I wanted us to stop and say, this is a moment. This is what I'm talking about. Let's don't miss this. And so it's just pausing in your day or in your week long enough to realize that it's passing us by, and we've got to seize it. We got to make sure we don't miss it.
I agree. I agree. I've definitely found not seeing people during this time, these past couple months, to be quite challenging, and you get stir crazy. But I'm trying to go and do other things that I've been putting off, which I think is why so many people are baking these days, based on what Facebook is saying, because we've always said we wanted to try to do that. So why not? And I find myself now doing more and more of that because I'm not yet ready to go out and see people yet, because I don't feel that it's safe yet. So yeah, that's great advice. I would agree. Okay, so we have another question. The person said, I know you mentioned working with Final Exit. Are you also involved at all with the lobbying group Compassion and Choices org?
No, I'm aware of them. I've heard of them, but I haven't gotten involved with them. And I'll tell you why. They're doing good stuff, but I've become acquainted a little bit with some of the laws in some of the states where dignity death laws are in place. It started in Oregon, I believe, and most of the others have copied their ideas. Those are steps in the right direction, but they're not good enough. For someone like me, for instance, most of those laws have a 6-month window. You have to be diagnosed by 2 doctors who agree that your lifespan is no longer than 6 months. And then you can partake in the death with dignity or physician-assisted suicide, or whatever you want to call it. Well, if I'm in that 6-month window, I'm pretty bad. I'm in pretty bad shape, and I don't intend to get to that place. So that law that option would never be attractive to me personally. I think they're steps in the right direction, but not far enough. That's just me.
Right.
And so I haven't gotten involved in that. Not that I'm opposed to it, but it's just not where I want to put my energy.
No, it may, yeah, that makes sense. America's in a strange place, and what's the best way to get forward and to change laws and to change public perception of how to approach death is going to take a bunch of different people coming at it from different angles, most likely.
Yeah.
So yeah. I would agree. Okay, so a couple more questions. Was there a specific event during your pastorship that served to accelerate your deconversion?
No, there were a multitude of events, and they kind of piled upon each other. It's like a Jenga game. You pull out one, you pull out another, and then finally it all tumbles down. And once I allowed myself the liberty to ask any question, everything was on the table. Nothing was off limits. A lot of people, when they talk about doubt among believers, a question is not a question if there's a predetermined answer. Let's just be honest. You're just playing games with yourself. So once I took away the predetermined answers and said, I'm going to allow myself to ask every question, then my investigation, it took about a year and a half of reading and thinking and writing down some things and really processing the origins of my faith, the origins of Christianity, the origins of the Bible. It was a process of discovery for me, and I came to the conclusion that it was all a house of cards.
So were you digging more into Christianity or more into, I guess, non the secular answers, the science, as which avenue was
I was digging into Christianity. I was analyzing the Bible from a very open-minded, analytical viewpoint, because my faith rested on the inerrancy of the Bible. My faith rested on the Bible being the Word of God. God's communication with mankind. And if the Bible was faulty, then the whole thing was faulty. And once I determined that the Bible was a man-made document, the rest of the dominoes fell pretty quickly. And if Christianity wasn't true, then I myself didn't feel the need to go find some other spirituality, some other religion. I didn't step down to a nicer God or a nicer religion. I just discarded the whole thing. If evangelical Christianity is not the answer, then I don't think any religion is, and I'm fine with that being the case.
Do you know people who've made that? I guess now that you've described it this way, it made me think of a stair-step approach, meaning they've gone from evangelical to the various.
Quite a few, and some who've stopped at the progressive. You know, that they've adopted a nicer God, and the Bible's not really the Word of God. It's just some good ideas, and God's somebody somewhere out there doing something. And I just don't have any interest in that. I don't see any need for it. It doesn't serve us in any way other than, in my view, a little bit of a security blanket. I don't mean that disrespectfully. I just don't see a need for a deity. I don't see.
Do you think there's harm?
Pardon?
Do you think there's harm if they've, I guess, stair-stepped to the lighter version of there's something there, but it's not exactly what's written in this book? Is there still harm, or?
Yeah, I think there's harm in the way that it keeps us thinking there's a God that's doing something for us, and I think that's a false notion. I just don't see any evidence for that. I think we're going to be better off if we'll discard religion altogether. John Lennon had it right. And we don't need that stuff. I think it keeps us separated. It keeps us, it stunts our growth. It arrests our development.
Okay. So you then went and joined or found the Clergy Project. What was the process like for you to join the Clergy Project? Just a little bit about that. And did you also meet ex-clergy that were non-Christian? Because you mentioned Christian ex-clergy, but were there other faiths represented?
I think there are a few, some ex-Muslims and so forth. Most of them are ex-Christians. Yeah, there's an interview process where you have to answer questions about your belief in a deity. It was a YouTube interview with a volunteer out in Oregon, I believe. And then it was just getting on. It's a very private online forum. It's very guarded because a lot of the ex-clergy I met some of them were still in ministry. And
were you?
We're needing to. No, I'd already exited.
Okay.
I was working in the secular world, selling insurance.
Yeah, I would think that, just thinking about that, you probably have the good vocabulary for making the transition into talking to people about insurance, which is to me kind of how I view Christianity.
Yeah, I was selling something that was real.
Yeah. Hey. All right. Here's another question. How do evangelicals get past President Trump's terrible history with women and blacks? Is it only his support for the hope of ending abortions?
It has to be. I'm mystified. I'm absolutely mystified how true evangelical Christians who really are sincere and believe in Jesus and the Bible can stomach this guy. I'm totally mystified. And it has to be that they believe he's going to get their agenda done. He's friendly to Israel, which is going to somehow usher the return of Christ back in some mysterious, convoluted arrangement of scriptures and prophecies. And he's going to end abortion, and he's going to make the gays behave, and all these things that they have on their agenda list. And that's the only reason I think they support him. I think he's a puppet to their agenda, but he's too stupid to even realize that.
Yeah, it's a shocker all around, just given his complete lack of seemingly any sense of right or wrong or honesty or
the least Christian president we've ever had in terms of behavior, and he's not kind, he's not generous, he's not compassionate. He shows nothing in terms of what you would think a Christian should act like.
Yes, I would agree. Anyway, I like I said, it's really hard for me not to talk about politics because
I'm too.
We're in a dark age as far as America. Seemingly, we've got so much going on, and we've got someone running the show, seemingly, even though Twitter seems to be fighting it a bit, who is almost throwing gasoline on the fire.
Oh, he does.
Which,
He instigates. He's a divider. He loves to divide people.
and I don't see how that works for anybody. No matter who you're trying to represent here, I don't see who's going to win by increasing the hostility across America. Maybe somebody's whispering in his ear that this is going to help the election for him in November. I don't know, but it's a pretty shocking statement. Okay, so moving on to other questions. Perhaps you could comment on the following. Death is not an event in life. We do not live to experience death. If we take eternity to mean not infinite temporal duration, but timelessness, then eternal life belongs to those who live in the present. And that was the question.
Okay. Well, I just tend to want to do away with phrases like eternal life, because if I don't think we can comprehend what eternity even is. I mean, as a we live in the realm of time and space, and to talk about something being eternal, I think we have to just deal with to me, I'd rather deal with terms that make sense to me in this world we're living in. So when I talk about life and death, I talk about life being the moments that we have where we get up every day, and this is the life I'm living. If you want to call that eternal life and that's all there is, then fine. I just don't see any use of the word eternal in that context. It doesn't seem to add anything to the conversation, in my view.
Right, that makes sense. Only just a couple more questions, and then we'll be wrapping this up. Was there anything that was surprising for you when you came out as an atheist? I mean, personally, like internally, did you have any, like, wow, I didn't know I was going to feel this way, or I didn't know this was what it was going to be like on the other side, or anything that was a surprise, I guess?
The most surprising thing was that it happened to me, because I never would have suspected, after living 3.5 decades as an evangelical Christian, that I would ever identify as an atheist. It wasn't something I was looking for. I didn't know anybody, not one person, that was an atheist. I didn't know what my life was going to look like. It was a gradual thing. It wasn't like I woke up one day and said, "Oh, I'm not a Christian anymore, I'm an atheist." So it happened so gradually that you're not even aware of the things that you're going through emotionally, and the thoughts that you're having. But just meeting other atheists, other ex-Christian atheists, and realizing these are some of the brightest, kindest, most wonderful people I've ever known in my life. And I just never would have imagined. As a Christian, you're taught that God is the one that makes us good people. And if you're good, it's because God made you good. If it's bad, it's because you don't have God in your life. Well, getting in touch with dozens, hundreds, thousands of atheists, who many of them were ex-Christians like me, and seeing the compassion and the generosity and the beauty and the warmth, it just is like, wow, why did we ever think we needed God?
Probably because of parents.
Yeah.
Did you were your parents also involved in the church that you became involved with?
No, my mom has become a Christian later in life, a very ardent Christian. I was not raised religious. I came to the Lord at the age of 18 as an impressionable post-high school teenager, and got swept up in the Jesus movement.
Wow. How did that happen? Sorry to sidetrack us, but how do you at 18 suddenly say, I'm going to go over there? I assume when you say this, it was no drinking, right?
Oh, no drinking, no sex, no nothing.
Yeah, at 18, that seems like a hard choice
Oh yeah,
to make.
I gave all my best years were washed away by the blood of Jesus. And my brother he got caught up at college, and it was a thing going around in the country back then. The Jesus movement followed the hippie movement, and so I got swept up in it and stayed in it for most of my life.
Wow, that's We've actually have several people who are part of the Clergy Project who live in Florida or winter in Florida, so they have come and talked with us as hangout
Yeah.
discussion groups, things like that. So yes, it's been interesting to see the different processes that people have gone through. Now someone has wrote this to you. They said, my 55-year-old brother died of ALS in 2013. He was prominent in his community in Bristol, Tennessee, was a strong Christian, not evangelical, and was a motivational speaker after his diagnosis.
Hmm.
He touched a lot of people with his dignity in life and attitude towards death. Thank you for what you're doing. He also did what you're doing and made ALS diagnosis ALS diagnosis worthwhile. So thank you.
Wow.
I wanted to share that with you.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
We are very happy that we've had you here, and we've now gone over by about 15 minutes, but we started a little late.
That's okay.
And thank you so much. It is so wonderful to see you and to hear your voice and to hear your story. And what you're doing is wonderful on so many levels. And hopefully you can come and see us in the spring when the world opens up.
We will. I would love to. Well, let's plan on it.
Yes, we'll make it happen. Florida's
Okay.
nice in the spring. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to kind of close us down here. I obviously this was an incredible talk, and thank you again to Dave for coming and spending time with us. I'd like to mention a few upcoming events. In 2 weeks, we have none other than a science-based paranormal investigator and deputy editor of Skeptical Inquirer Science Magazine and research fellow with the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry. He's joining us from out west to talk about conspiracy theories, including the psychology of conspiracies, different types of conspiracies, the history of conspiracy theories, and of course, we'll take questions. And be sure to join us for that and look for an announcement soon about future bi-weekly Sunday afternoon webinars. As a reminder, we are continuing our meetup events, including the Free Thought Cafes, the Secular Women events as Zoom meetings. Again, all of this information, in case you're watching this on something other than through the Zoom meeting right now, it's at meetup.com/CFL Free Thought. So thank you so much for being a part and watching this. And until next time, have a great day and stay safe.